Theo Von's podcast is full of iconic and hilarious moments, perfect for falling asleep. From slow-burning road tales to strange AI stories, here are the best This Past Weekend stories to lull you into the weirdest dreams. In episode 599 of This Past Weekend, Theo Von sat down with CEO Sam Altman for a wide-ranging conversation that veered insightfully into the world of artificial intelligence and its role in the finances of the future.
Fast. But how will people survive? Like, how do we adjust our structure of finance, of like, if some people own the companies that have the AI, and then a lot of people are just using the AIs and the agents created by AIs to do things for them, how will society, like societal members, still be able to financially survive? Will there still be money? What is that? Does that make any sense, that question?
It totally makes sense.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know.
What began as a lighthearted banter took on a more serious tone as the two comedians discussed the rapid rise of AI technology, not in jokes, but in finance. The conversation pivoted to the growing presence of AI in wealth-building tools, investment platforms, and economic decision-making.
Two guesses. One, I think it is possible that we put, GPT-7 or whatever in everybody's ChatGPT. Everybody gets it for free. And everybody has access to just this like crazy thing such that everybody can be more productive, make way more money. It doesn't actually matter that you don't like own the cluster itself, but everybody gets to use it. Mm-hmm. And it turns out even getting to use it is enough that people are like getting richer faster and more distributed than ever before. That could happen. I think that really is possible.
The moment that struck a chord was when Theo bluntly declared that money is being hacked, expressing both concern and awe at how convincingly AI can optimize and streamline financial choices once made only by human experts. Theo explained that people had sent him examples of AI-run investment apps or budgeting tools tailored to mimic the habits of successful investors. He noted that while the structure and strategy felt incredibly precise and almost shockingly accurate, there was still something uncanny about the experience. The systems were powerful, but what they lacked, in his view, was the messiness of lived financial experience. These tools weren't born out of job loss, family debt, or the hustle of living paycheck to paycheck. Instead, they were constructed through algorithms trained on mountains of financial data and behavior patterns. It was wealth management by code, not by grind. Altman added to the thought, laughing at the irony but also acknowledging the deeper implications. If AI can't optimize wealth building so efficiently, what does that mean for traditional financial advisors or for anyone trying to navigate the system without help? The two riffed on scenarios where AI-generated portfolios or automated side hustle suggestions began to flood social media, outperforming human advice simply by being faster and more data-rich. The idea that a machine could outmaneuver a seasoned financial coach, not because it understands people better, but because it understands patterns better, seemed both dystopian and realistic. They also touched on how this could reshape opportunity for the average person. Unlike the old model, where financial success was often gatekept by institutions or insider knowledge, AI promises access to smart tools that help anyone budget, invest, and grow. But at what cost? If everyone follows AI advice, Theo mused, doesn't that flatten creativity in how people hustle and survive? Still, the tone wasn't entirely skeptical. Altman pointed out that for many people, especially in underserved communities, these tools could be a breakthrough. Budgeting apps that actually work, investment platforms with no minimums, real-time advice tailored to your income. It's democratizing.
Two guesses. One, I think it is possible that we put, GPT-7 or whatever in everybody's ChatGPT. Everybody gets it for free. And everybody has access to just this like crazy thing such that everybody can be more productive, make way more money. It doesn't actually matter that you don't like own the cluster itself, but everybody gets to use it. Mm-hmm. And it turns out even getting to use it is enough that people are like getting richer faster and more distributed than ever before. That could happen. I think that really is possible.
Ultimately, the conversation became a thoughtful reflection on the role of human insight in an increasingly optimized world. Can a machine ever understand what it feels like to risk your last $50 on a side gig? Or to take financial advice from someone who's been broke before? Maybe not. But maybe, with the right guidance, it can at least help make sure fewer people end up broke in the first place. What they both seemed to agree on was that the future of money is changing, and while the machine may know the math, the story behind every dollar still belongs to the people earning it. In Matt McCusker's appearance on This Past Weekend, what started as a simple conversation quickly spiraled into a hilarious deep dive into Craigslist misadventure stories that perfectly captured the strange charm of suburban problem solving. One of Theo's personal experiences was a saga involving a sketchy encounter with a very strange date who came back with Theo to his place and did the most shocking thing by the time they were together.
I figured that if she wouldn't be, who knows, I figured she might be a man or whatever, but hopefully she wasn't.
Nice.
That was kind of my attitude. And then I go there, bro, smoking hot, bro.
What?
I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This lady's gonna kill me or whatever, drink my blood or whatever.
Yeah.
So goes back to my place. She covered anything in my place that had any light, closed, all covered the VCR thing, in no light at all.
I do that, by the way.
You do?
I don't like fucking lights when I'm sleeping. I would put
No,
tape
it's
over
for
it.
sex. She did it.
Oh, she did it for oh, she didn't want the cam probably.
You think I'm just gonna invite somebody over just to fucking sleep at my place?
You gotta get to know her, dude.
You think I'm gonna bro, meeting somebody and then letting them sleep at your house really is a crazy practice now.
Dude, it was casual encounters, dude.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty cash.
You're right. You're right. Why am I trying to make it more than it is?
True. So she covered every source of light and then had sex with you?
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I don't know. It was I was willing to do it. I knew that, but I didn't know much else after. I just knew it was very interesting. I couldn't tell if she didn't want to see me, if she was scared. Yeah, maybe she was nervous that there was a camera or something.
Theo also had another case where he began by describing a time he scored Craigslist for free firewood to heat his place during a particularly cold winter. He found a listing that sounded promising. Free wood. Just take it. But when he showed up, it was less of a helpful gift and more of a cruel joke. The firewood was rotten, damp, and scattered across a muddy backyard. And to make it worse, some of the logs looked like they had already been burned once. It was like someone was just cleaning up their yard and calling it generosity.
So one day we're like, well, we need firewood, right? So that's what you have to have. So we look on the thing, free firewood, right? Or something. And it's like 13 miles away. We just moved to LA. It took us an hour and 30 minutes to go get it. It was out in like Diamond Bar. Mm-hmm. And we drive all the way out there. And it's just like somebody had like literally taken like a big shiffer robe or something and just batted it together with beating the shit out with an axe. And so it just chipped up.
Theo howled at the story, chiming in with his own Craigslist tale about trying to pick up friends back in college and how he gave out room space to fake Army veterans who were actually his buddies. But Matt wasn't done. He too had Craigslist stories of his own. He went on to recount when he bought a video game set for his sister on the site. It seemed like a great deal back then. And also, he too had a lot of college experience with giving out a room, claiming he had bragged a lot about those activities, telling of how he helped out a friend passing through a hard time, all to feel good about himself. Theo laughed, but also found deeper humor in the idea of chasing almost wins. These Craigslist finds, he said, were like urban myths. You never really get what's promised, but the journey is somehow still worth it. It's like treasure hunting if all the treasure is cursed. The refrigerator story may have been the most absurd of all. Theo described getting it for his birthday, but the problem was getting the refrigerator through the door, but it just wouldn't go through for the most part. Matt added his own funny experience of trying to get a shelf he had bought through the bedroom door, but it just wouldn't fit. What elevated the story beyond just a series of logistical fails was the way Matt and Theo discussed the mentality behind Craigslist treasure hunts. It wasn't really about saving money. It was about the thrill of maybe getting something good, even if you had to wrestle it through the snow or abandon it halfway home. Theo likened it to spiritual training. You go in thinking you're getting something for free, but what you're actually getting is humility. The episode was filled with laughs, but also a sense of solidarity for anyone who's ever been too broke, too optimistic, or just too stubborn to say no to a bad deal. Matt's Craigslist saga wasn't just a suburban comedy. It was a reminder that sometimes the dumbest missions make the best memories. And for listeners looking to fall asleep, there's something oddly soothing in hearing two friends bond over failure, misjudgment, in the universal language of, "What the hell was I thinking?" Next up in this unforgettable episode with Duncan Trussell, Theo Von dove into a captivating and unsettling discussion that touched on the bizarre convergence of aliens, government transparency, and the existence of extraterrestrial life. Known for their abstract, wandering style, Theo and Duncan's conversation felt like it was drifting through dreams and digital paranoia, yet at the heart of it, they unearthed something eerily timely. The idea that governments around the world, particularly the US, have seemingly stopped denying the experience of UFOs and aliens, and that this sudden shift might not be as innocent or revealing as it appears.
The fact that you get to live in a time period in American history where the federal government seems to no longer be denying the thing that people have been saying forever.
But here's my question then would be, what's in it for the federal government that they would now not deny it?
Well, I think that's one of the most important questions regarding this situation is why? Why suddenly are they kind of slow leaking this information? Like, I don't know the answer to that. Like,
Theo, never one to shy away from deep speculation, pointed out what many have been feeling. The timing feels off. It's not just that the government is admitting unidentified aerial phenomena exist, it's that they're doing it so casually. And why now? Theo mused, his voice hovering between curiosity and concern. In the past, even acknowledging UFOs could take a political career. Now senators are holding public hearings. Former intelligence officials are speaking openly, and videos released by the Pentagon show objects moving in ways that defy known physics. What Theo and Duncan tapped into was the eerie sense that this shift isn't necessarily rooted in a desire to inform the public. It might be about controlling the narrative. Theo joked that it feels like the government is handing over alien disclosures the way someone confesses to a crime just before someone else exposes them. There's an almost theatrical quality to it, as if revealing the existence of non-human entities has become less about truth and more about distraction or damage control. The two also talked about what it'd feel like to encounter an alien up close.
Why? And look, I would love to see it. Would I like to meet an alien? I don't know, dude.
you would. Give me a break. You know, just from our few podcasts together and conversations we had, wouldn't you like it? Of course you'd like to meet an alien. It'd be the coolest thing ever. Don't you want to know what they smell like? No one ever talks about that. What do they smell like? What does a gray alien's head smell like?
Yeah.
Is it bitter? Is it a stinky smell? Is it fishy?
If they're fishy, dude, I'm out.
That
Bro, how much would the smell of aliens depend on how much we give a fuck?
Duncan added that it's not just the content of the disclosures that's strange, it's the way people are reacting. For most of human history, proof of life beyond Earth would have been the most groundbreaking event imaginable. But today, those announcements often pass with little more than a shrug. Theo called it a kind of disclosure fatigue. The world has been through so much chaos in recent years that even the admission of extraterrestrial life feels like just another headline in the feed.
New enemy, are they realizing that like religion isn't working enough on people anymore, or the fear of there's not enough fear imposed on people at the, I don't know. Or it could just be that
that's blue beam. You're talking about blue beam. That's the big conspiracy theory. That's like essentially like there's two possibilities. The one you just said, which I guess if you're going to do like Occam's razor, that is the most likely one, right?
What is Occam's razor?
The simplest solution is generally the solution.
Got it.
So in this case, it's more likely this is a human operation than aliens, based on our understanding of physics and the distance of habitable galaxies where they have planets in the Goldilocks region, the amount of time it would take to get here based on what we understand about how fast you can go. Probably.
The pair also speculated on whether the government is only revealing some of what it knows. If they're finally saying, yes, there's something out there, what aren't they telling us? Have there been actual encounters, communication, crashes? Theo played with the idea that the truth might even be weirder or more disturbing than fiction, and that the slow drip of information is designed to acclimate the public to something far bigger. By the end of the conversation, the laughter gave way to a quiet, haunting question. What if the truth has always been known by a few, and it's only now, when the world is too tired to react, that they're finally letting it slip? It was classic Theo and Duncan funny, strange, and unsettlingly insightful. In the Brooks and Dunn episode of This Past Weekend, Theo Von welcomed the legendary country duo into his laid-back, story-rich world. And what unfolded was a heartfelt journey into the not-so-glamorous side of touring life. One of the standout stories was about a snowy night on the road, equal parts inconvenient, magical, and deeply humanizing. Ronnie Dunn and Kix Brooks began by reminiscing about the days when they traveled in tour buses for months at a time. Life on the road wasn't always glamorous, especially during the winter. One particular memory that stood out was when the two of them met the legendary singer, Johnny Cash. Theo was really curious about the whole thing, and the two were more than glad to tell the whole story.
Quiet by nature when you first meet him. And that in and of itself is intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
And then as you get to know him, he's a 17-year-old kid. You know, that was it. I mean, he'd do just crazy. You know, funny as all get out.
Yeah?
Yeah. My wife, her first husband, invented the car one piece at a time. And Johnny sang about it, one piece at a time. Anyway,
Or built that car.
he built the car.
Oh, built that car one piece at a time?
I'm sorry, yeah.
The song.
He built the car, so he...
Or Johnny really built a car? Sorry, I'm confused. You
No,
wrote a song.
her ex-wife built the car about the song that Johnny sang.
Got it.
One
He
Piece
liked
at
a song,
Time.
and him and his bud said, "Man, let's build it. Let's actually build it."
They were always screwing around. They owned strip coal mines in Oklahoma, and he
Johnny did? Or his friends?
no Janine, my
Janine.
wife's.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so they were well acquainted. They all became fast friends, traveled the world together. I mean, really, really tight. And so when I was brought in, her husband passed away. And when I was brought in, it's like she's marrying her dad.
To the two, Johnny was even more eccentric than the world paints him to be. And he told a funny story about one encounter with Johnny on how his life was. Theo asked them of how they managed to overcome being shared in the early days of their careers. And surprisingly, Dunn talked about how it took him quite a while to come out of his shell. It's funny to think about because the idea that these two musical legends ever had a period where they were scared of the spotlight is just too far off to think about. But, of course, during an interaction with Theo Von, it's no surprise that such an aspect of vulnerability could be discussed so freely.
Or not, you remember?
Yeah. I was super shy and quiet, and then I'm kind of coming out of my shell a little bit these days, but he was obviously glad to see her. I mean, I'm the new kid on the block. You know, you don't just screw it. It's like
who's
going
just long drink
taking
of
your
water,
girlfriend. Yeah, your girlfriend bringing you over to meet her parents.
He was just pervert or whatever, yeah.
Theo Von offered a thoughtful take on the way Johnny Cash had been idolized over the years. He pointed out how people often remembered the image, the black clothes, the outlaw persona, the deep voice, but overlooked the humanity behind it. To Theo, there's something bittersweet about how legends like Cash become symbols instead of people. Society tends to polish them up, stick them on a wall, and forget that they were flawed, funny, tired, kind, or sometimes angry, just like everyone else.
Was he as, because now he's almost, there's an idolatry about him in a way. You know, you see the t-shirts with the Johnny Cash and just says Cash on it, like.
No, he's always been that way.
It's
He's
always
been
been
that way
like
forever.
that.
Listen, here's a funny thing. So the log cabin that they had us live in, because June did that for Janine, not for me. You know, called her and said, "Look, okay, this guy's going to try to make it in the music business. You know, good luck. It ain't going to happen, but we'll give you a place to live."
Okay.
Right?
We'll give you a flammable home.
Right. A temporary residence, okay? Because it's not going to last long till I find you a guy with money. All right. So thank God we have these hits right off the bat, and suddenly June goes, "Whoo, okay, you're in." You know, she told Janine during that first visit, she said, "Look, here's how it goes down." She says, the odds are 1,000,000 to 1. No, 10 billion to 1. You know, they'll make it, and if he does, it's not going to last long. It's just that's the nature of the business. And number three, they're all crazy if they do make it for a long time. So she called her babies. It was Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Hank Jr., Larry Gatlin. I mean, just the Wild Boys.
What fascinated Theo wasn't the myth of Johnny Cash, but the man who sat quietly in a room and carried more presence than someone shouting from a stage. It wasn't about worshiping him as a larger-than-life figure, but understanding the stillness he brought to the authenticity that couldn't be faked. Johnny became a mirror people looked into when they wanted to feel something real. Theo's perspective wasn't cynical. It was reverent in a grounded way. He didn't think people should stop admiring Cash, but maybe admire him more for the quiet truths he lived by than the loud legends built around him. Strip away the myth, and you find a man who still matters. Next up, in his laid-back and surprisingly thoughtful conversation with Post Malone on this past weekend, Theo Von delivered one of his more subtle, profound takes on modern technology, wrapped, of course, in classic Theo humor. The conversation took an unexpected detour to the legacy of one of music's greatest icons, Elvis Presley. Joined by Post Malone, the two artists delved into a surprisingly thoughtful exchange about the final resting place of the king of rock and roll, touching on ideas of legacy, mortality, and the odd reverence society holds for celebrity burial sites.
Yeah, but like, we did that deal. I played Devil in Disguise, and they let me jump in the pool.
Wow.
It was amazing. I love Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It's now or never. Yeah, his Christmas stuff, man. Dude, the craziest thing about Graceland, I didn't know he's buried there.
I didn't know that either.
So we're going on the tour and like, this is a lamp and stuff. This is where Elvis used to hug his wife and kiss his mama.
You had a cool tour guide.
And, this guy, he's a pervert. He said kiss his mom about 40 times in a row. He'd be like, and kiss his mama. Like,
The discussion wasn't just about where Elvis is buried. It was more about what it means. Graceland, his Memphis mansion turned public shrine, became a springboard for the two to explore the strange relationship people have with death when it comes to fame. They mused on how people traveled from all over the world just to stand near where a legend was laid to rest, almost like they're hoping to absorb some part of his magic or mourn something they never really knew. Theo, with his trademark humor laced in deeper existential wonder, reflected on the surreal nature of posthumous worship. Post Malone, bringing his own blend of insight and calm energy, added to the conversation by talking about how these places become more than burial sites. They're symbols of the permanence of culture, markers that outlive the person and take on mythic weight. There was also a moment when they wondered aloud what it says about people's desire for connection to greatness. Is it really Elvis's people are mourning, or is it something larger, like the passing of an era, a dream, or even their own youth? Post Malone talked about this experience at the Presley Museum.
You know?
He wasn't even a guide. He was just a guy. He just came.
Oh, featherbed. But then we get out the back and like, you guys want to go smoke, you can go out there. So there's people out there and I'm vaping and his grave is right. I'm like, wait, he's buried here.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
I did not know that. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And it's like crazy, like they say, I didn't get to go up in the room, it was late. But they say nothing's been touched in the room, in his bedroom, and like his slippers are still there and everything like that. Crazy. The museum part of it, like where you can go in and see like the books he was reading and everything like that, like the JFK assassination book that he was reading, like that's the last book he was reading, like crazy. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So who's kind of a conspiracy guy? Yeah, you think?
Maybe that's the conspiracy.
What made the conversation so compelling wasn't just the topic, but how it unfolded. It wasn't morbid. It wasn't even necessarily sad. It was reflective and human. Here were two modern-day celebrities, grappling with the idea of death not just in general, but in the context of what it means to leave something behind. The burial site of Elvis, in that moment, wasn't just a piece of land. It was a mirror for everyone who's ever thought about what remains after we're gone. Ultimately, the conversation drifted on, as it often does on Theo's podcast, but that little detour into Presley's resting place lingered. It reminded listeners that even in the glow of fame and success, questions about legacy and meaning never go away. On one of the more emotionally layered episodes of Theo Von's podcast, the topic of country singer Morgan Wallen came up, specifically the controversy surrounding a viral topic where Wallen was caught using the N-word. The moment struck a nerve not only because of the subject matter, but because of the way Theo responded, quite measured and unsure.
This country singer who used the N-word, he didn't really, I think people kind of galvanized. Did people kind of go, this is too much, or what happened?
Morgan's a friend of mine. He was on a podcast. He was on a couple months ago. He used it. He called his friend the N-word in the street. He came back and apologized. He said, I'm going to try to do better. And, the media did what they did. They ripped him up. What got me about that, obviously, it's like he called his friend pussy ass Nigga, right? To a white dude. And I think a lot of white people should be called the N-word. I got called it a bunch growing up. I still get called it sometimes by this dude that lives in the park, the black guy by me will call me it every now and then. I like it a little.
Theo didn't dive in with immediate condemnation or blind defense. Instead, he paused, visibly processing the weight of the situation. The moment was raw, tense, and real. Rather than treating it like gossip or a headline, he treated it like it was a complex and sensitive issue that affected real people. Wallen had used the slur during what many described as a casual, drunken exchange with a white friend, but even the context didn't make the situation any less harmful. What stood out most in Theo's response was his attempt to humanize the conversation without dismissing the harm done. He seemed to wrestle with a fine line between recognizing someone's wrongdoing and acknowledging their effort to make it right. The conversation wasn't about defending what he said, but about the fallout, the apology that followed, and the long road back toward accountability. Wallen's comeback, his public apology, his outreach, his attempt to take ownership was also discussed. Theo reflected on what it means to truly take responsibility, not just saying the right words for a press release, but doing the internal work, facing the discomfort, and genuinely trying to grow. There was an undercurrent of Southern culture present too, this unspoken tension between tradition, ignorance, and progress that often gets tangled in conversations around race.
Right, sometimes,
cool.
No joke, I was walking with a girl a couple weeks ago and the guy said it and I know she didn't hear him and I fucking said, hey, say it louder, bro, and he did. And he said it louder, bro. He's a black guy. He can say it, right? He can
in a way you feel like he trusts you and he knows that you're not a prejudiced white guy.
Right, he knows I'm not a spy.
In a way, it feels like he's saying something. It's like a term of endearment for you.
Yeah, it was like a coat I got to wear for a couple seconds, gave me a little bit of clout with the dame, or the man, whatever she was. I don't know what she's chosen to be. I hadn't checked in with her.
The podcast didn't provide any perfect answers. In fact, part of what made it resonate was how unresolved it felt. Theo didn't try to wrap it up in a neat lesson. He acknowledged the harm, the weight of the word, and how a moment like that affects not just the people involved, but fans, communities, and public discourse at large. There is also an unspoken tension in how the discussion echoed broader themes in American society. How easily a careless moment can expose deeper societal wounds, and how people, especially public figures, are often held under a microscope where their worst moments can define them if not handled with transparency and humility. By the end of the segment, it was clear that the conversation was more than just about Morgan Wallen. It was about accountability, grace, and the uncomfortable process of learning publicly. And it showed that Theo's platform, while comedic and unpredictable, doesn't shy away from difficult conversations, especially when they have something real to say about the world we live in. In one of the more lighthearted and subtly profound moments on this past weekend, comedian Jim Gaffigan joined Theo Von for a conversation that, as usual, drifted between humor, reflection, and strange comfort. On an episode that blended quiet introspection with offbeat humor, Theo Von found himself discussing an unexpectedly tender topic with fellow comedian Jim Gaffigan, the idea of the ideal woman. What started as light banter gradually turned into one of those rare podcast moments where genuine ideas broke through the jokes. When Jim playfully asked Theo about what he looks for in a partner, Theo didn't jump to the typical answers. Instead, he offered a picture that was more emotional than physical. He spoke about warm eyes, not just in color, but in presence. Eyes that made you feel like you were safe, like home. He described a woman who made muffins, not because of any domestic expectations, but because there was something comforting, even grounding, in the image. Someone who wakes up early to fill a quiet kitchen with the smell of something baked with care. It was a far cry from the flashy or shallow ideals you might expect in entertainment circles. His version of love seemed built on softness, peace, and unspoken understanding. Jim, listening with that dry, thoughtful demeanor he's known for, didn't mock or deflect the sincerity. Instead, he gave the kind of advice that only someone who's been through the emotional trenches of family life could.
Sense of humor is really important.
Yeah, sense of humor or the ability to laugh. Even being able to laugh, though, is also like having an inverse sense of humor. Like if somebody's a good laugher, I think it's just as, it's almost better than a sense of humor because at least they're having the joy, you know?
By the way, the hard worker thing I think is really key too.
Yeah?
Yeah, my wife is a very hard worker, and that's great because then you can do less. No, but it is. I mean, we have a similar work ethic. We enjoy working. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't say working. I'm not saying like, hey, let's go grab some construction shifts. You know, it's like, it's fulfilling.
He gently reminded Theo that while those cozy images sounded poetic, real relationships are more about what happens when the muffins burn, when eyes aren't always warm, and when the house is loud with life. He spoke about acceptance, about loving not just the best versions of someone, but their worst days too. The unkempt mornings, the tired nights, the frustrations that no one plans for, but everyone faces. What made the conversation special was the mutual respect between the two. Theo, who often masks deeper truths behind Southern charm and strange metaphors, seemed to appreciate Jim's steady presence. And Jim, ever the voice of weary dad wisdom, seemed genuinely moved by Theo's desire for something heartfelt in a world that often feels surface level. There was an unspoken understanding in their back and forth. The men don't always get to talk about love in this way. Not about desire, but about comfort. Not about conquest, but about connection. And in their conversation, they carved out a space where that kind of longing didn't have to be corny or weak. It could be funny and honest and still deeply human.
Things like that.
And what about do you want her to be younger than you, older than you?
I would probably say younger than me. I want her to be able to bear children if she wants to.
Yeah.
But then I got to make sure that I'm in a good space too. I don't want to be some philanderer.
Right.
And I don't want to be a man who's peeking over the fence and, talking to the neighbor's wife.
Right.
And I don't want to be...
you shouldn't be neighborly. You shouldn't be talking even to a neighbor. No, but you're saying, so you want to also be mature. You want to be to the point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to be doing any more I don't want to do any more conniving or any, I want to, I just want to be locked in.
As the talk moved on, the tone lightened again, with jokes about kitchen disasters and misread signals. But something about that moment lingered. Theo's ideal woman wasn't a fantasy figure. It was a symbol of calm in a chaotic life. And Jim's advice, grounded and quietly profound, reminded listeners that love isn't just found in warm glances or muffin-scented mornings. It's built in the mess, the mundane, and the effort to keep showing up. On a wildly entertaining episode of Theo Von's podcast, comedian Nick Swartzen took listeners on a chaotic ride through his high school days in a time filled with rebellion, confusion, and a whole lot of mischief.
What were you like in school? I was a fucking nightmare.
Were you?
Oh my God, it was terrible. I was like really smart kid, but I just didn't give a fuck.
The conversation turned into a hilarious confessional as Nick opened up about his troubled teenage years, revealing that he had been expelled not once, but 4 separate times. Nick painted a vivid picture of his adolescence as a blur of poor decisions and wild antics. He wasn't trying to be a villain, just a kid who didn't know where to channel his energy. Whether it was mouthing off to teachers, pulling off elaborate pranks, or just refusing to follow rules for the sake of it, Nick had a reputation for pushing boundaries. He wasn't malicious, just reckless, and with each expulsion, he seemed to dig deeper into the persona of the class clown turned chaos machine. What made the story even more engaging was how self-aware Nick was about it. There wasn't a trace of regret in the traditional sense, just an understanding that there was once a kid running on pure instinct without much guidance. He laughed through the tales, but underneath the humor, there was a layer of honesty about being misunderstood and not knowing how to fit into a structured system that didn't make room for kids like him. Theo, always able to relate to life's odd detours, jumped in with his own reflection. He admitted that he too had been a strange kid in high school, not necessarily in the same way as Nick, but in that sort of quiet outcast who thinks too much kind of way. He talked about feeling like an outsider, someone who never quite matched the tone of the crowd.
It seemed a little ridiculous to me. I like being friends with like the sick lady. Dude, I would get a boner and go into the office and tell them I was sick. And I'm just pointing at my boner.
How old were you?
15, 16. You know, and I'd be like,
What
I
did
need to
she
sleep in
do?
here. I need some
That was-
ice. She would give me ice.
She would put ice in your penis. Did she ice it or no?
No, she would give me 2 bags.
Give you a
of it.
little pack.
Not a little pack. I mean, 2 bags was a fucking healthy
She gave you
boner.
half a cube.
Yeah,
She cut it in half and it's like,
The mutual understanding between the two comedians made the conversation feel like more than just funny stories. It was a window into how both men, now successful, beloved comics started off as the ones teachers warned others about, or classmates didn't quite know how to label. Their teenage years weren't just a phase. They were formative battles that shaped their humor, their personalities, and their outside charm. By the end of the discussion, what stood out wasn't just how much trouble Nick got into, but how the chaos eventually gave way to creativity.
weird. I got expelled from school 4 times.
Oh my God.
4 times I got expelled. This is a true story.
What happened to you, man? You seem like...
I was... People are like, think that, but I was fucking reckless, dude.
Yeah.
My friends were all... I had some hardcore friends. And,
dude? Trent Reznor? What the fuck did you do?
Yeah, I was fucking Trent. No.
Who was your friends, man?
Dude, we were stealing cars and shit when we were like 14. Friends in gangs and shit.
Oh.
But I got expelled for pulling fire alarms so we could go smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
But it was like a 3,000 compound school.
Mm-hmm.
So we would empty out the whole fucking school just so we could rip butts and we'd go back in.
Yeah.
I got pinched twice. Then I smoked a blunt in school. So I went to the auditorium, me and my buddies, light up a fat blunt. And this is the era when like Cypress Hill came out.
Yeah, be
and
real.
it was just game on, dude. So we light up a blunt. Cops kick in the door. We get handcuffed. We get like filed out in front of everybody too. So it was dope. We had like serious fucking cred.
Yeah. People like, what'd they do?
I was just like, that's what's up. And then I started crying. But I got quartered.
Both he and Theo seem to agree, without saying it outright, that sometimes the weird kids, the ones who don't follow the rules or fit into the mold, end up building the most interesting lives. What looked like trouble then was actually a sign of something untamable and eventually something powerful. It was a conversation packed with laughs, but also a subtle reminder that not everyone finds their place early, and that's okay. On one of Theo Von's more introspective podcast moments, he shared the story of how he came to realize he was meant to be a comedian, not through fame or applause, but through something far more personal and raw, doubt. There was a point early in his life when someone made him feel like he simply didn't have what it took. Whether it was a teacher, a peer, or someone he looked up to, their words hit harder than he expected. It wasn't just criticism. It was a statement that cut at the core of his sense of self. They didn't see talent in him, and for a while, he wondered if maybe they were right. He didn't sing, he didn't paint. He wasn't a math genius. He wasn't the kind of kid people labeled as going places.
I was like, oh, if you don't think that I have a talent, well, I'm going to do the hardest job in town, and I'm going to do it the best. And that started to like just get into my head. Like, you don't think I have talent? Well, let's see if I do.
But instead of folding under the doubt, Theo did something that would shape the rest of his life. He decided to chase the hardest thing he could think of, making people laugh. Comedy for him became a kind of rebellion, not just against the world, but against the quiet voice inside that whispered maybe he wasn't good enough. If he could take that pain and turn it into something that made people feel better, lighter, happier, then maybe that was a gift worth having. He recalled a moment in school that stuck with him. There was a boy named Todd, quiet, kind of fragile, maybe going through more than he let on. One day, Theo said something ridiculous and unexpected, and Todd just broke into uncontrollable laughter. Not a polite giggle or a classroom chuckle, but that real can't breathe, holding your sides kind of laugh.
Also easy for him to spell. And, I'm not joking, that's what his father said. And easy for him to spell backward and forward. Same name, Todd. So, that's true, man.
Was this guy's his name was Todd?
Why are you so laughing at him?
It's just a funny sounding name, that's all. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it was pretty funny, I guess,
Todd.
Tot.
Yeah, well, let's
Tot.
talk about Todd.
Sometimes he would just say T-O-T was his name, but I knew it was Tot.
Yeah.
He would try to spell it out and, like he was tricking me.
Yeah. So did you do like the open mic circuit in LA?
Yeah, started doing open mics here.
Like at Marty's or where? Like at the Comic Meltdown and stuff?
No, they had a place over on the west side of town I lived.
Yeah.
I was sleeping under, a buddy of mine had a bed, and I was sleeping under his bed for $150 a month.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes even in his bed sometimes. When he would be out of town or when he would leave for work, I'd climb up into his bed, dude. And I've never been heavily homosexual, but I will say this, that there's nothing really gayer than getting into a man's warmth after he's already left the room,
That moment stuck with Theo, not because of the attention, but because he saw firsthand how a single joke could flip someone's entire day. That feeling became addictive, not the attention, but the connection. Making people laugh wasn't just about being funny. It was about seeing people, lifting them up for a second, and reminding them that even when life feels heavy, there's still room for joy. And once he saw that in Todd's face, he knew. He didn't need a trophy or a diploma to tell him he had something. That laugh was enough. Over time, Theo's path wound through open mics, bad sets, strange gigs, and countless moments of self-doubt. But that early experience, the sting of being underestimated, and the quiet triumph of seeing someone truly laugh kept him going. It reminded him that comedy wasn't just a job. It was a way of turning pain into light. In a world full of noise, Theo chose to be a voice that reminded people to laugh, even if it started with a kid named Tot, and a moment that changed everything. In a candid and surprisingly grounded episode of Theo Von's podcast, comedian Stavros Hilkias joined him for a conversation that veered into deep waters concerning transgender identity, personal conviction, and the strange relationship between genuine struggle and corporate opportunism. While both are known for their humor and offbeat takes, the moment revealed a different side of them, one marked by curiosity and a desire to understand rather than judge.
Or women who want to be the other, right?
Yeah.
Or they feel stuck inside of they feel wrongfully convicted.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Convicted in the wrong body.
Right.
That's what it seems like to me anyway. Although some people just want to go, I'm neither, I'm non-binary, I'm throwing on some overalls, I'm just hanging out. I'm getting honestly a haircut a lot like yours. That's
yeah, so many.
They started by exploring what it must feel like to be transgender, not just from the outside looking in, but trying to truly imagine what it feels like to feel misaligned with your own body. The two comedians acknowledge that for someone to stand up and say that they feel trapped in the wrong skin takes an immense amount of belief. It's not always something people say for attention or trendiness. It could actually be something that comes from deep within. Theo, always searching for the emotional core beneath the chaos, reflected on how strange and isolating it must be to grow up feeling like your body doesn't reflect who you are inside. Stavros, in turn, brought a thoughtful angle that emphasized compassion over politics. But the conversation didn't stop at the emotional level. They took a sharp turn into how big corporations have entered the conversation around gender identity, often not out of support, but for the sake of optics. They critiqued how companies jump on the LGBTQ+ movement during Pride Month or in viral campaigns, using trans people and their stories as tools for marketing validation. Logos turn rainbow color, slogans are changed, and ads feature token representation, not always to uplift, but to appear progressive and increase profits.
They try, like, what is, I just wonder, what is the is there a business goal of it? Does it seem, that's what I'm just curious about it. Because it seems like an interesting move.
Yeah. I see, that's the thing. That's what I think has kind of been blown kind of crazily out of proportion, is like trans people that I know, they just want to be trans.
Right.
They just want to like not be like killed. Like, cause that's the thing, if you're like going M to F, if you're like born a man, you transition to female, it's like, that's like a lot of them like become sex workers. A lot of them like get like violence against them. Guys who feel like they've been either tricked or like whatever. And it's like scary. It's like a pretty scary thing to, it's a pretty like tough lifestyle. And they're just like, hey, I just want like not to be killed and to be like basically respected and to be able to go to like the doctor. And I just don't, it's such a low percentage of people too. That's what, it's crazy to me that we're having this discussion.
That's the part to me is interesting.
Like,
it's such a small, and I wonder, are you helping trans people buy like Bud Light? Like, is this the move to help? Because I totally understand what you're saying. Like, imagine if you are.
Theo and Stavros both pointed out the discomfort in how something as deeply personal as gender identity can be reduced to a brand's talking point. It's not that visibility is bad. In fact, they both recognize how important representation is. But when it's used without genuine care or support, it starts to feel hollow. Almost like these individuals are being exploited rather than supported, and their stories used as a way to signal social virtue without addressing the real issues they face.
Trans, which maybe is good, but it's also such a small percentage of people. I guess I just don't understand. Is this going to be helpful to trans people? Because it almost, like, if I'm a trans person, right, and my life is tough, right?
Yeah.
If I really am, because I believe that, I mean, God makes so many cookies, man. You could,
yeah.
Something, or nature could be also merging. You don't know.
Yeah.
And
I also think in like other societies, like ancient ones, people were kind of like in between genders, and other societies had like multiple genders.
Yeah, look at Robin Hood.
Yeah, exactly. Those guys were in tights. Come on.
You telling me?
Somebody threw on Maid Marian's dress.
Big John was a bear, dude.
Yeah. There's this big backlash against trans people because I think it's become a conservative boogeyman where they're talking about like, drag queens, and they're talking about how drag queens are going to like groom your like they're calling gay people groomers and shit. And I think that's really dangerous. And I think that attention has come because trans people are being used as a political tool in the negative. Whereas like, I mean, dude, it's so funny to hear people talk about how drag queens are like, they're so dangerous for kids, where it's like, drag queen, like, you think they molest people? Like, politicians and priests are up to...
Despite the heavy themes, the conversation wasn't angry or preachy. It was honest. Two comedians, usually known for their humor, took time to reflect on how layered and human the conversation around transgender identity really is. Beneath all the noise, they found a shared respect for the courage it takes to live your truth, and a clear skepticism for anyone, especially corporations, who could use that truth for clout. On another particularly wild and memorable moment of Theo Von's podcast, during the conversation with comedian Nick Swartzen, things took a turn into the unhinged as Theo recounted one of the most bizarre nights of his life, an intense experience with mushrooms that sent him spiraling into a psychedelic fever dream filled with confusion, vulnerability, and unexpected nudity.
Woman, she had no idea what was going on, but yeah, that was my first mushroom experience.
Dude, I got so fucked up one time at my buddy's house, dude. And he was fucked up, dude. He had to go lay in the back, bro. And at one point, he told us, "Take my skin off, or I'm gonna beat the fuck out of you." And
God.
And I was like, "Whoa, bro, we're not doing good."
Theo began painting a vivid picture of his younger days, times marked by aimless energy, a craving for meaning, and an openness to anything that felt like escape. On this particular night, he and a group of friends decided to take mushrooms. At first, it was laughter, nature, and strange thoughts about trees breathing or time slowing down. But as the trip descended, the atmosphere shifted, logic began to dissolve, and soon the entire group began shedding their clothes, not as some wild act of rebellion, but because the mushrooms made it feel all right. Clothes suddenly felt restrictive, like they didn't belong to their bodies. The boundaries between reality and instinct blurred, until being naked didn't seem weird, it felt natural. Theo described it not with pride, but with a kind of awe, as if he still couldn't fully believe how far gone he had been. The moment wasn't about ego or shock. It was about being overwhelmed by a force inside his mind that stripped away normal behavior. They weren't trying to be outrageous. They were just lost in a different frequency. But the story didn't stop there. In the middle of this chaos, something inside Theo told him he needed to leave. Whether it was paranoia, purpose, or some emotional pull, he got into his car, still completely naked, and drove across town. The image alone was outrageous. A man, mid-trip, mind swirling with colors and thoughts, navigating the streets in nothing but his own skin.
Middle of the night in my buddy's mom's driveway, so I'm laying on the horn, bro. He comes running out, bro. He is also completely naked, bro. And we got naked in separate places and then met up together naked. That's how good those mushrooms were, bro. These weren't those keep your clothes on fungi, you know what I'm saying?
Where was he headed? To a friend's house. Not for help, not out of fear, but because something in his brain told him that his friend needed him, or maybe that he needed his friend. When he arrived, he banged on the door, barefoot and vulnerable, until his friend opened it to the sight of a wild-eyed, fully naked Theo. The silence between them, Theo recalled, was thick with confusion and disbelief. Nick Swartzen could barely contain himself hearing the story, laughing through the absurdity. But underneath the humor, there was something deeper. Theo wasn't just sharing a funny mushroom story. He was sharing a memory that spoke to something more raw, about how altered states can peel back all the filters, how moments like that can remind a person how fragile and strange the human mind really is. In the end, it wasn't just about the mushrooms or the nudity. It was about how far we can drift from ourselves, and how sometimes the weirdest nights become the clearest mirrors of who we are underneath it all. On one of his classic storytelling streaks during a podcast episode, Theo Von dove into one of his high school era tales that walked the razor's edge between absurdity and teenage chaos. A story fueled by curiosity, psychedelics, and a complete lack of adult supervision. This time, it was LSD.
It was also 1996, maybe. And she lost it, man. She just lost it on this LSD, you know. And so she wanted to stay in this small bedroom. We were all fucked up, and we would go in there and like pouring like warm water on her back and shit like that, dude. We were fucked up. But that's back when some of the LSD would just make you do weird shit, you know.
Theo recounted how he and a group of his friends first got their hands on acid during those reckless years when everything felt like an experiment and nothing really had consequences. They didn't take it to find themselves or explore the depths of consciousness. They took it because they were bored, wild, and chasing a feeling that might make life in their small town feel bigger than it really was. The acid hit differently, not like weed or even mushrooms. It didn't just alter how things looked, it twisted the entire framework of what reality even meant. Time bent, colors danced, and everything familiar suddenly became hilarious or terrifying, or both at once. And that's when things really started to unravel. One of the more unforgettable moments from that trip came when hunger kicked in, something no amount of psychedelic detachment could erase. The group decided they needed food and fast. Someone mentioned a frozen pizza, and the entire group latched onto the idea that it was a holy mission. The only problem, no one could figure out how the oven worked, whether they were too high to remember how buttons functioned, or whether the appliance just looked too alien under the effects of LSD. It didn't matter. The solution they landed on, in their warped logic, was to cook the pizza in a dryer. Theo described the moment with his usual mix of awe and disbelief, watching his friends try to preheat a dryer, arguing about the proper settings like they were engineers solving a NASA-level problem, all while giggling uncontrollably, and misjudging space and time was burned into his memory forever. The pizza was thrown in, the dryer started spinning, and for a while, they genuinely believed they had cracked the code to a new cooking method. Needless to say, the plan didn't work. The pizza turned into a limp, hot mess. The dryer smelled like a mix of burnt cheese and detergent for weeks afterward. But at the time, none of them cared. The failure wasn't even a failure. It was part of the adventure. Part of the kind of night that felt like it stretched on forever, where nothing made sense, but everything mattered.
There's nothing I want more in this life. I'm 54. I got the girl at the house, and it would be a shame. I would love to take lead deep into acid, murky waters, old school.
Yeah.
2 hours of confusion.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
8 hours of hell and 3 hours of thinking about what the fuck just happened.
Wait.
Yeah.
What about 8 hours of hell?
It's 2 hours of confusion. So if you're popping at 8,
right,
it's 2 hours of when is this gonna hit me? What's gonna happen to me?
Yeah.
Is Joey gonna watch me? And then it's 8. It's 6. It should be old school would be 4 to 6.
For Theo, these stories weren't just about doing drugs. They were about being young, stupid, and totally free in a way that can never be replicated. Looking back, he laughs at the madness, the danger, the innocent stupidity of it all. But there's also a layer of affection in the way he tells it, like those nights, as chaotic as they were, somehow helped shape the storyteller he'd eventually become. On one of Theo Von's most unexpected podcast tangents, he opened up about a series of bizarre, hilarious, and slightly uncomfortable run-ins with the swinger world. True to his style, the stories unfolded in that slow southern drawl, a mix of wonder, hesitation, and vivid imagery that had listeners hanging on every word, and not just for the laughs, but for the strange reality he was describing.
A resort hotel, it's right on the water. It's a nice place to probably, be by yourself or, I guess be with somebody else's spouse or whatever. But then we start seeing people just bringing in all these little, at hotels and motels, they got the trolleys where you put all your goods on them, you wheel them up to your room, and a lot of people bring their own food and everything. And these people were bringing everything, dude.
He started by talking about an invitation he once received to a swinger party in Los Angeles. Not some seedy backroom deal or shady message. It was a formal, almost polite request. Someone had reached out, letting him know about a gathering, a mature evening, full of open-minded couples who'd be exploring each other's energy. Theo, ever curious, but not without limits, admitted he thought about it briefly. But ultimately, he said no, not because he was judging anyone, but because of his own insecurities. He joked that his back and butt were way too hairy to be showing up at a place like that. He didn't want to be the guy who ruins the vibe with a patchy, tangled mess creeping out of the back of his boxers. He painted a hilarious picture of people in a candlelit room trying to feel sexy while he's walking around like a misplaced Wookiee, wondering if anyone had a lint roller or some nair. For Theo, there's an odd line between being open to experiences and knowing when your grooming habits might kill the mood. But that wasn't his only close call with the swinger scene. He recalled another time earlier in his comedy career when he was booked to perform at a private party. The pay was good, the crowd seemed well off and energetic, and he figured it was just another off-the-grid gig in some mansion tucked into the California hills. He showed up ready to tell jokes, not realizing he walked into an upscale swinger party in full swing. At first, it seemed like a normal event. People were drinking wine, lounging by the pool, dressed a little too casually, but still within the realms of rich people being eccentric. Then the energy started to shift. Bathrobes were coming off. Eye contact was getting intense. Hands were lingering a little too long on shoulders and hips. He began to notice strategically placed rooms with dim lighting and velvet curtains. That's when it hit him. He wasn't just at a party. He was on the edge of an entirely different kind of evening.
None of them, to me, were visually appealing, right? They weren't appealing to me. But it was swingers, right? And then you saw they had this one lady was bringing in the black guy, and you could tell he was the fucking hammer, you know? You could tell this dude was flying. He might have gotten paid to come here and perform. You know, he was that dark dagger, you know, that air meat, you know, that they was FedExing around the fucking country, probably to come in and just satisfy the regional, you know, that regional coont, you feel me? So this dude's hitting the airways and probably just, you know, just straight up drilling in different areas around the country. He's popping off, you know, he's sprouting out, you know, he's rooting down in some local, you know, local wives. I mean, you could already see, like, these guys probably had posters, you know, that all the white men were gonna be like, go get him, black guy, you know, like Terrence forever, you know, shit like that. Because this dude was about to pop off on some local wives. But you had people bust, you know, just people with wheat thins and all kinds of big snacks. And I'll tell you this, man, I wasn't into it at all until, I'm not even joking, till I saw the wheat thins. I love wheat thins, man. I don't know who did wheat thins or Pringles, but they fucking killed it. Now, those are kind of snacks that would make me want to be at a swingers thing, you know?
Theo wasn't judging anyone in those circles, far from it. He seemed fascinated, even slightly impressed by the confidence it takes to be part of that world. But he also knew it wasn't quite for him, at least not yet. He needed to do some grooming first, maybe hit the gym, and definitely figure out how to get emotionally untangled from the mental image of himself walking into an orgy and getting mistaken for a misplaced janitor. The stories weren't about shock value. They were about what happens when you stumble into the strange corners of human desire and try to make sense of it all with nothing but curiosity and a sense of humor. Swinger parties for Theo became just another chapter in his collection of bizarre life experiences, equal parts hilarious, awkward, and undeniably real. In the end, Theo made it clear he's not closed off to anything, but for now, he's keeping his robe on, his back hair to himself, and his adventures mostly in the observer category. For a guy like him, sometimes watching life unfold is just as wild as jumping in. On an episode of This Past Weekend, Theo Von welcomed a guest who stood far outside the usual circles of entertainers, influencers, and eccentric personalities. This was an everyday New York City sanitation worker.
Anything really unique over the years? Any bone structure or anything like that?
Listen, you'd find all kinds of
Treasures?
stuff if you were looking. Like I said, like
you didn't look though.
I didn't have time for it. Like I said, I was running. I want to get done. I want to be out of the street.
Right.
I don't want to deal with people. Like I said, the people that don't pay attention to you, they drive into you.
Right. It's just risky.
Hot, you know, crabby days. But this one time, I'm with my buddy, you know, Louie, and we're picking up this apartment building.
Yeah.
And we open the gates, and there's I think it was 6 or 7 Joker poker machines. And I'm like, what the fuck is
Oh,
this
yeah,
about?
video poker?
Yeah, like in
Yeah,
the
I love
bars,
them.
they have those,
Yeah,
the
Mom
cheap,
used to use our allowance in them.
Yeah.
His voice, rarely heard in mainstream media, carried with it a quiet confidence and a rhythm shaped by the streets he worked on every morning before most of the city woke up. What followed was one of the podcast's most unexpected soothing and reflective episodes, one that broke away from the noise and delivered a grounded meditation on work, life, and meaning through the lens of manual labor. From the moment the conversation began, it felt different. The guest didn't come to entertain or sell a narrative. His calm demeanor and simple way of speaking stood in contrast to the chaos and speed of the city he served. He painted a picture of New York in its quietest hours, the wet sidewalks, the empty alleyways, and the slow awakening of neighborhoods still asleep in their beds. While most people rushed through the city with earbuds in and eyes down, he saw things others missed. He was familiar with the rhythms of the block, the subtle changes in who lived there, what businesses had shut down, and what had newly arrived. Theo, known for his mix of absurdity and raw introspection, found himself engaged on a different level. Instead of reaching for laughs, he listened. The conversation slowly moved from day-to-day details of garbage collection into more thoughtful territory. The guest spoke about how his job gave him an intimate look at the human condition, not through grand interactions or deep conversations, but by touching the things people discarded. Through the discarded couches, broken toys, bags of uneaten food, and boxes full of old photographs, he witnessed stories most people never realized they were telling.
You find things here and there.
Yeah.
I always found something that, somebody was throwing out and I didn't have to dig, like it was next to the curb. I found a moped once in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
On the side of right on the side of a basket, the corner basket there. And it was probably from like a Chinese restaurant, something like that. It was like locked in to turn left. So who's going to just keep driving in a circle? Kids must have stole it and they realized, we can't use this. So they left it at the corner basket.
Right.
So I told my partner, I'm going to take this. And as we're putting it, like I said, there's a little trap door. As I'm putting it in there, the cops pull up. So we're like, and this guy I'm working with is like, damn, Owen, you'll fuck me all up now. I'm going to get locked up for this shit.
Right, we're stealing a fucking...
stealing a moped from somebody,
Yeah, from some Chinese kid over here.
Yeah, the guy's laying there holding bags. And so he's like, they just pulled up. They were like, yo, is it run? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to see. Brought that shit home. Broke the steering collar. And wound up getting it started. And I used to use it to go down to the bodega down the block and grab beers and shit.
Yeah.
The two discussed the dignity of labor, especially the kind that society often ignores. There was no self-pity or longing for recognition in the way the guest spoke, only an acceptance of the role he played in the machinery of the city. He found clarity in the routine, in the repetition, in the knowing glances from residents who waved or let their dogs out just as he came by. For someone whose job was so often invisible, his sense of connection was surprisingly strong. They also touched on mental health, especially as it relates to jobs that are isolating, physically demanding, and frequently overlooked. Despite the solitude of the work, the guest conveyed a strong sense of internal peace. Years on the job had taught him how to slow down mentally, to notice the small things, to build a kind of emotional muscle that comes from accepting what is rather than fighting it. He didn't try to turn his life into a metaphor, but his way of seeing the world naturally carried a quiet wisdom. There was no preaching, just lived experience, shared plainly and honestly. One particularly powerful thread in the conversation centered around the way garbage collection mirrors life itself. There's decay, yes, but also renewal. Every day brought new refuse, but also fresh beginnings. People throw out the old to make room for something new. Behind every plastic bag and worn-down dresser, there was a decision to let go. That cycle, repeated daily, told stories of change, growth, decline, and hope. It was an almost spiritual reminder that even in the act of cleaning, there's something profoundly human. But beyond the philosophical reflections, Theo and the guest also touched on something often overlooked when discussing manual labor. Garbage collection, especially in big cities like New York, is a massive business. It's not just about keeping the streets clean. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with layers of opportunity. For city sanitation departments, private waste management companies, and independent haulers alike, there's serious money in trash. In cities across the U.S., garbage collection is one of the most stable and well-compensated blue-collar professions. Union protection, generous pensions, and solid benefits make it a sought-after position. But the industry goes far beyond municipal jobs. Private companies that handle commercial waste contracts for office buildings, restaurants, and apartment complexes can earn significant revenue. Some specialize in recycling, others in construction debris, and others still in high-end waste removal for luxury clients. There's even a growing market for tech-driven waste solutions, automated systems that track disposal trends and optimize routes to save fuel and time. For those with an entrepreneurial spirit, starting a garbage collection or junk removal process can be surprisingly lucrative.
There's really collectors and they kind of hide masquerading as sanitation workers?
They do that, or some of these guys get the stuff and sell it.
Wow.
They have businesses, man.
Really?
Yeah, they go to flea markets and shit.
Yeah.
Dude, you have no idea, man.
Oh.
One dude in Staten Island, I'd hate to even give him the shout out because he's a douchebag. But anyway.
Yeah, fuck him. But yeah, tell me.
Dude, it was like Sanford and Son on his roof, leaving the garage some days. Like he'd take, furniture, this, that, everything. Yeah. And you would catch him at the flea market. But dude, listen, from what was told, he had over $1 million from what he collected and sold in a bank account.
Nuh-uh.
Yep.
What are some other things people would collect out there in the trash? Anybody find?
It's one of the few service sectors with consistent demand regardless of economic downturns. People always produce waste, and cities always need to deal with it. Some individuals in the space go on to own fleets, invest in transfer stations, or tap into the scrap and recycling markets to increase margins. What may start as a single truck operation can, with time and vision, evolve into $1 million business. This financial aspect adds another layer of complexity to the conversation around garbage work. It's not just a gritty, thankless job. For many, it's a source of pride and prosperity. It supports families, builds generational wealth, and offers a clear path for those willing to do hard work. And unlike many white-collared paths, there's little illusion in it. The work is real, immediate, and tangible. By the end of the episode, it was clear that what made this conversation memorable wasn't a dramatic story or a viral moment. It was the slow unfolding of respect between two people. One, a comedian known for his colorful language and wild stories, and the other, a man whose life was built around quiet consistency. Their exchange served as a reminder that wisdom often comes not from status or celebrity, but from those who live close to the ground, who move through the world quietly, but with intention. In one of the more haunting, yet strangely peaceful episodes of this past weekend, Theo Von interviewed a professional mortician who had performed over 4,000 embalming procedures. What might sound like a dark and uncomfortable conversation quickly turned into something unexpectedly reflective, gentle, and full of quiet awe for life, death, and the mystery in between. From the beginning, Theo approached the guest with a mix of curiosity and reverence. "Man, you must see things most of us never do," he said. The mortician nodded calmly, his voice smooth and deliberate, like someone who's grown used to silence. He shared stories not to shock, but to illuminate what most people avoid thinking about. What happens when we die, and how the people left behind begin the process of saying goodbye.
It's not uncommon. A big thing, a lot of people will take cigarettes with them, because you take somebody who's smoked hard,
boy.
They'll put that, cigarettes in that shirt pocket.
You're
or
gonna
whatever.
want that smoke, dude. If I'm dead, bruh, light me up a damn 100, baby. You know what I'm saying? I'm burning a fucking Winston, dog. If I'm dead, man, I ain't milling around.
I've had, a lot of people put pictures of themselves,
And what about a joint? Somebody sneak a joint in there sometime.
I'm not going to say that that's never happened, because when we're standing back up there and the family goes up for their final viewing, there's no telling what they could stick in there. I've had I've had some very interesting stuff. I had somebody request to be buried with their shot.
What could have been a grim recounting of death instead became a meditation on care. The mortician explained the detail and dignity involved in preparing somebody's body. It's not just about preservation, he said. It's about honoring a person's memory, helping families get closure. You learn quickly that this work isn't about death. It's about the people who are still here. Theo, always fascinated by overlooked professions, dug deeper into the emotional side. How do you handle all that sadness, he asked. The mortician, with quiet strength, spoke about the emotional shield you naturally build over time, but he also admitted that certain cases like children or unexpected losses still hit hard. You don't stop feeling, he said, you just learn to carry it. They talked about the rituals around death, how different families and cultures process grief, and even the strange requests he received. One family wanted their loved one dressed like a NASCAR driver. Another brought in a cassette tape to play during embalming because it was his favorite fishing music. These small human moments gave the episode a warmth that balanced the gravity of the subject. Theo asked philosophical questions too. Do you think doing this job changed how you look at life? The mortician didn't hesitate. Absolutely. You stop wasting time. You realize what really matters, and you never take a normal day for granted. The conversation, for all its somber context, had an oddly grounding effect, like a long exhale you didn't know you needed.
That's right, but we're not supposed to work in the afterlife.
But I'm sure there's a couple opportunities to make a little
You
coin.
always want a side hustle, don't you?
I want that side hustle. Now, do you take those items out, or those items go on?
The family it's the family's choice. If the family wants something in there for visitation and then they want that back, we'll take it out. But if they want it to go with them, it goes with them.
Now, you close the casket during if it's an open casket, you guys close it during the procession or funeral deal?
It depends on when the family wants that closed. You know,
Okay.
if they want it closed at the beginning of the service, some families like for everybody to file by at the end, one final viewing, and then after that, after the family goes up for their final viewing, then we close the casket. So a lot of times that's up to the family.
Can somebody get buried with their money if they want to?
If they want to bring it in, they can get buried with it.
Have you ever had somebody that was their request and they put it in there?
Not all their money, I've had people, want to get buried, with, Granddaddy always kept a $2 bill, or, he always had change in his pocket, didn't want to go anywhere without a little money. I've had that, but I've never had anybody say, we're going to put $1 million in this casket.
Yeah.
What made this episode perfect for late night listening was the rhythm of it all. The mortician's voice was steady and calm, Theo's reactions respectful and full of wonder. There were no punchlines or chaotic moments, just two men quietly exploring what it means to be alive by talking about death. It was one of Theo Von's more contemplative podcast moments. Grim in topic, yes, but delivered with care, gentleness, and even a touch of healing. For listeners looking to fall asleep with something peaceful yet profound, this conversation with a man who has literally faced death thousands of times is oddly perfect. It reminds us that even in our endings, there can be grace. On a laid-back episode of This Past Weekend, Theo Von was joined by none other than Jody High Roller, better known as Riff Raff. And what unfolded was less of an interview and more of a meandering, nostalgic journey through the strange, beautiful patchwork of their childhood memories. It wasn't about trends or hot takes. It was about the good old days, those simpler times when everything felt a little more magical, a little more gritty, and a lot more real. From the start, the vibe was pure throwback. They kicked things off talking about old high school commercials, the kind that played during Saturday morning cartoons, where sugary cereals were marketed like they were treasure maps and toy ads felt like action movies. There was a rhythm to those commercials, a strange comfort in knowing you'd see the same goofy jingles every week. Jody recalled some of the weird snack tie-ins, while Theo added how some of those commercials made it feel like owning a certain snack or toy meant you were part of a secret club. And that led them into a full-blown deep dive into the snacks of their youth. Before kale chips and protein bars, it was all about Dunkaroos, Gushers, and anything neon-colored and borderline radioactive. They laughed at how wild the snack designs used to be, the packaging that looked like it was made by a child with a crayon and a sugar high. It was less about flavor and more about energy, chaos, and who had the best lunch trade at school.
Remember when Cool Ranch Doritos? Remember, because for 20 years it was just Doritos, cheese only.
Regular.
Baby. Nothing fancy.
When you saw them Cool Ranch,
and then suddenly
there wasn't just ranch. It was Cool Ranch. Damn.
And it felt good on you.
Everybody wanted the Cool Ranch.
Oh, dude.
They were sold out.
They didn't have them everywhere. I remember biking all around town. We heard that they had them somewhere. Dude, a friend of mine got hit by a Trans Am on his bike looking for Cool Ranch Doritos, bro. And was on in a fucking wheelchair after that.
Eventually, the conversation drifted into sports, and Prime Mike Tyson came up. They both agreed there was something different about watching Tyson fight back then. It wasn't just a sporting event. It was an event that felt like time stopped for a few minutes. Theo described how families would gather around small TVs, dads yelling at the screen, uncles placing side bets, the fight over almost as soon as it started. Jody talked about Tyson's aura, the fear he put into people before the bell even rang. The whole segment was less about stats and more about the feeling of that era, the electricity of a Tyson match, the cultural weight of it. Then Jody flipped the script and asked Theo what his typical summer was like back in those days. Theo leaned into the memory. For him, summer wasn't about vacations or beach trips. It was about freedom. Long, hot days with no school, riding bikes down cracked sidewalks, and doing whatever you could do to stay out of trouble, or at least get caught less. But there was also an incentive system. His mom, like a quiet dealer of childhood rewards, had a tradition of handing out a little summer money for good behavior. If he kept out of fights, did his chores, and didn't mouth off too much, he'd get a few bucks. The amount would grow depending on how well he stayed in line. It wasn't a fortune, but at that age, it felt like winning the lottery. Enough for snow cones, maybe a secondhand Game Boy cartridge if he saved.
And to flex a little bit in front of your boys, or to chicks a little bit. You wanted to get that fireball, show up with that red, that lusciousness kind of, and have that heat in your mouth, man. And that was about...
You could just stick it in the side and it'd see how long it would burn.
And they knew you could fuck if you had that piece in there. And you get that thing was about a nickel, and you put that thing in your jaw and show up, man. So I would do that, and then if I had a little bit extra money, then I would get myself maybe a chocolate for at night, get myself a Kit Kat, and they had 4 pieces in there. Sometimes I would get my mom a Payday candy bar, and that was kind of like a nice candy bar they had back then.
Right.
That now it's like Nature's Own. They got all these fancy ones, but back then they had that Payday, and it was for smart people.
The episode was drenched in that dusty, sun-faded nostalgia, the kind that smells like chlorine, tastes like cheap candy, and sounds like laughter from kids who didn't know they were building the best memories of their lives. There wasn't a message or lesson, just 2 guys vibing over a time when life felt more analog, less polished, and somehow a lot more real. On an episode that took a left turn into the cosmic unknown, Bobby Lee joined Theo Von for a classic sit-down filled with unpredictable humor, raw vulnerability, and one particular topic that set the tone for absolute chaos: Mexican aliens. Theo, with his signature Southern curiosity and off-kilter delivery, brought up the now infamous incident in Mexico where aliens were supposedly unveiled in front of Congress. Those mummified figures that looked more like papier-mâché than extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, go back to it.
Whoa, dude. That's crazy. So that they found it, huh?
Yeah, they found 2 aliens, dude, and they presented them in these little
That's
coffins,
insane, dude.
I love how there's like dirt around.
Yeah. Wow.
And one of them had eggs in it too, they said.
No.
Yeah.
Bobby leaned into the absurdity of it right away. He wasn't buying it, but he wasn't fully dismissing it either. The conversation quickly evolved from a mild curiosity about life beyond Earth into something that could only come from the minds of those 2 unpredictable personalities. When Theo asked him, straight-faced, what he thought about the Mexican aliens, Bobby immediately spun the conversation into one of his classic tangents, this time implying, half-jokingly and fully unfiltered, that the the supposed aliens looked more Chinese than anything else. The way he said it wasn't aggressive. It was playful, mischievous, and delivered in the way only Bobby could. He described their slant eyes and delicate features, drawing parallels between them and his own appearance, almost taking ownership of these mystery beings like distant interstellar cousins. Theo nearly lost it laughing, the kind of laughter where he leans back in the chair, barely breathing, completely caught off guard by Bobby's sideways logic. Bobby then took it further, suggesting that if aliens were real and had landed anywhere, it wouldn't be shocking if they showed up looking like someone's uncle from Shanghai. He layered in an entire comedic theory about how maybe the aliens had crashed into a Panda Express on their way to Area 51 and just never left.
Huh? Yeah, why have people been putting cigarettes out on him, though? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Bro,
That's crazy, dude.
Look at the posture, too.
Good posture, I think.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's just so like, dude,
yeah.
They can't fucking break dance, I'll tell you that right now. Imagine them do it. You know what I mean?
But beneath the absurdity was a real curiosity and even a bit of existential doubt. Bobby, in his more grounded moments during the conversation, began to talk about how for most of his life, he wasn't sure what to believe. He'd been fascinated by aliens as a kid, watching shows like Unsolved Mysteries and digging deep into those old gray men with big heads conspiracies. But as he got older, reality kept pushing back. He'd never seen one. He'd never been abducted. And for all the talk and blurry footage, there was still no undeniable proof. The whole topic in his eyes lived somewhere between myth and clickbait. Theo, never missing a beat, riffed off that idea with one of his own. What if the aliens did come here and saw what was happening on Earth? TikTok dances, crypto scams, live streamers eating bugs, and just decided to dip out quietly. Bobby agreed, suggesting that maybe the aliens came down to talk peace or intergalactic trade and ended up stuck in traffic behind a dude blasting reggaeton out of a busted Nissan Sentra. It wasn't long before they looped the conversation back to the look of the alleged aliens missing in Mexico. Bobby kept returning to the idea that if he showed one of those little figures to his aunt, she'd probably just think it was an old ancestor. The conversation danced on the line between irreverent and introspective. For every joke about Chinese-looking aliens or interstellar racism, there was a quieter undertone of uncertainty, wonder, and that same kind of spiritual question that comes up anytime you talk about what's out there. By the end of the episode, it wasn't about Mexican aliens anymore. It was about how people deal with mystery, how some make fun of it, some chase it, and some, like Bobby and Theo, sit in the middle and try to laugh their way through it. For Bobby, the truth about aliens didn't need to be certain. It was more about the joy of the mystery itself. He admitted he kind of liked not knowing, because the idea that aliens could show up at any time, in any form, even if they happened to look like someone's cousin from Guangdong, was comforting in a weird way. For Theo, the alien talk was just another launch pad to explore deeper fears and fantasies. But with Bobby in the room, the conversation stayed grounded in comedy, shot through with Bobby's wild imagination, and tethered to his ability to take any subject, no matter how strange, and make it feel hilariously human. In the end, neither of them claimed to have the answers, but they gave listeners something better, a moment of absurd honesty about our place in the universe, and a reminder that even if the aliens are real, they're probably laughing at us too. Theo Von once shared a story about being at a UFC event, catching a moment with none other than Donald Trump. It was one of those nights where the energy in the arena felt like it had its own heartbeat, crowds roaring, lights flashing, cameras swiveling, and fighters walking out like gladiators from another dimension. Everything was cranked up to 11, and in the middle of it all, there was Theo, taking it in like a kid at a monster truck rally for grown-ups.
I met Trump at the UFC's.
Last week in Miami, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was interesting, man. I mean, you're like, you know, I love being at UFC, right? So it's like, for me, it is literally, it's like being, like, you ever been baptized or whatever?
Yeah, I got baptized.
It's like that.
don't recall it, but yeah, I mean, I feel like though I've never been to UFC, but just the vibe of it, how they just have everybody there, it just seems like one big, I guess for you, obviously, just an interesting VIP party.
He talked about how wild it was, how the atmosphere was so electric, it almost felt like you were inside a video game. You'd see celebrities, old wrestlers, athletes, YouTubers, guys who probably own oil fields, and somehow, right next to all that chaos, was Donald Trump himself. Secret Service agents flanking him like shadows, the whole crowd reacting with either massive cheers or heavy boos. Just pure spectacle. Now, Theo doesn't pretend to be political. He's more interested in weird human moments than debates. But for him, seeing a former president in person, especially in a place as primal and raw as a UFC fight, was surreal. Trump was close enough that Theo felt like he should say something. And so he did. He waved, gave a respectful nod, maybe even offered a fist bump. But Trump didn't recognize him. He just kind of smiled that same familiar grin and kept it moving. Theo said he wasn't even mad about it. He understood. Trump meets 1,000 people every hour. Theo's just a dude with a mullet and some good stories. He's not exactly on the political radar, but still, he appreciated the moment. Not in a clout-chasing way, but in the kind of way where you're just happy to be part of something weird and big and uniquely American. Because how often do you get to say you waved at a president while sitting 3 seats down from a guy in a full-body wolf costume and 1 row up from Post Malone? What really stuck with Theo that night, though, wasn't the glitz or the politics. It was the fighters. He talked about how much he respects them, those men and women walking into a cage, knowing they might get their jaw broken or their dreams derailed in front of millions. For Theo, that level of courage hits deep.
That close up, that seems like kind of a, once you go there, you can't sit up high.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just to see the fights, but it definitely, I felt real fortunate, to go. And yeah, you're just seeing these guys and like, I mean, they're putting it on the line, like, I think in a lot of ways, comedians, strippers, fighters.
Yes, sir.
Anybody that does something that puts themselves out there, you're all trying to gain, like, to be seen in some way. You're all using something you have to attract, to get acceptance, kind of in a way.
100%. I mean, I've never done stand up. That's one thing I always tell myself. If I ever go to a comedy club or my friends send a clip of somebody doing stand up, I will never say anything bad about anybody in stand up. If you have the balls to get up there, all power to you.
Yeah.
I think all power to you.
Yeah, that's how I am about fighters, I think, because it's just so, like, I always had a tough time defending myself when I was a kid, and so, I didn't feel like I had protection and shit, so you get to see these guys who are doing it and find out the different reasons that they're doing it, and it's all, to me.
Growing up, he said he never could really defend himself. He was wiry, unsure, always trying to talk his way out of fights instead of into them. So when he sees someone step into the octagon with nothing but 4-ounce gloves and a prayer, it moves him. It's like watching someone do what he never could, and he honors that, even if he can't fully understand it.
But yeah. But it was interesting. Yeah, and Trump's just like, "You're good. How you doing? You're doing good."
He's in president mode.
Yeah, you're great. You're doing great. Your parents are doing good.
Get with the parents.
It was just, he's so like,
yeah.
He said, I was like, my dad's been dead for like 22 years, and he's like, but before that, he was doing great. That's what he said, dude.
He's in
yeah. I'm like, you know what? He was. He was.
So yeah, maybe the president didn't know his name. Maybe the night was just another fight night in Vegas. But for Theo, it was something more. Well, thanks for winding down with some of the strangest and most heartfelt stories from the mind of Theo Von and his guests. If you enjoy this bedtime dive into Theo's world, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, because everyone deserves a weird story to fall asleep to. I'm Mickey V. Good night.